So it's my honor today to introduce to you Christine Carpenter. She is the Vice President of Membership Engagement for Hale, which is the Council of Adult Experiential Learning. In that role, Christine leads Hale's membership representing colleges, universities, organizations, and employer education coalitions, the Energy Providers Coalition for Education, and the National Alliance for Communications, Technology, Education, and Learning. In these roles, Christine works with a broad range of stakeholders and partners to help individuals attain meaningful learning, credentials, and work. Christine holds a bachelor's degree from Arizona State University and a master's degree in organizational leadership from Colorado State University. Today, she's assembled a great panel that's going to have a conversation around corporate relationships and universities. With that, I will turn it over to you, Christine.
Thank you so very much. Appreciate that. As I was just introduced, I am going to talk a little bit about a panelist in just a minute, but I wanted to just first thank Wiley. I also want to thank Learning House and Christy for putting this together. This opportunity is really helpful for us because we're really proud of some of the work that we're doing. So a little bit about Hale. I know we heard just a tiny bit about what Hale does. And I just want to mention that we too are very much focused on enhancing opportunities for adults, really making sure that we are, focused on lifelong learning. We heard a little bit yesterday around adult working learners really being more the non-traditional that now is focused on being the traditional. We see that too as that shift happening to the traditional student today, and all the panelists that we work with that are here are going to talk a little bit about how they see that role shifting as well. So there was a little bit of discussion or introduction about EPSI and NACTEL. I do want to say EPSI, Energy Providers Coalition for Education, is in its 18th year. And then NACTEL, which is the National Alliance for Communications, Technology, Education, and Learning, is in its 20th year. So we're very proud of both of those coalitions. They're represented by industry, which includes employers from corporations as well as labor organizations, and higher education, colleges, and universities. What is the goal of those? The main goal of those is to make sure we're providing education to help the workforce fill their skill gaps and knowledge gaps for some of the changes in these industries that are really evolving. So I want to talk a little bit about what we plan to provide to you today. We have kind of 3 topics that we want to touch base on, and we want to have a conversation. I want you to hear directly from the panelists. So the first one is around understanding industry partnerships from both the perspective of employers as well as educators. The second is really understanding the role of curriculum, how that plays a very important part in what I would say is the long-term viability and sustainability of these programs. And then most importantly, I think, is understanding both benefits and challenges. What does it look like to bring industry and higher education together? And really want to also leave time for questions in the end. So with that, I want to introduce the panel, and we'll start here with Rob Lawlor. He is the Site Training Director at one of the Exelon nuclear plants here in Illinois. Then next to Rob, we have Bruce Emmil. Bruce is the Dean of Bismarck State College Energy Programs. Next to Bruce, we have Nancy Hale. She's Executive Director of the Pace University online programs. And then next to Nancy, we have Jeffrey Batiste, and Jeffrey's a Senior Manager for the Learning and Development Department within Verizon. And both Rob and Bruce are going to talk a little bit about the EPSI partnership, the coalition focused on the energy industry, and Nancy and Jeffrey are going to talk a little bit more about it from the telecom perspective, communications industry. So I thought I'd start off with a percentage, kind of something that I think everybody in this room may have seen or kind of knows a little bit about, but it was a study from APSIA on higher education goals and objectives around partnerships. And interestingly enough, employers and educators that are in these type of partnerships, they were asked about how they felt the importance of that particular partnership is. And the employers indicated that 30% of them felt that this type of partnership is important. On the other end, colleges ended up saying that 57% of them felt and saw the employer partnership as being very important. So when you really think about that, leveraging partnerships like this can really take on a lot of different forms, and they can really take on a lot of different benefits, as well as some challenges. So I thought we would start off with our panelists talking a little bit about a couple things. Their role with their employer, their role with the coalition, and at the same time, talk a little bit about what type of partnership components are really required for you within your role at your organization to invest your time and resource and what makes it beneficial. So maybe we could go ahead and start with Rob and Bruce from the EPSI perspective.
Okay, so thank you, Christine. So I'm the site training director at Byron Station, which is in Northern Illinois, for Exelon. So we have 13 nuclear sites throughout our industry. So we're the largest pressurized water reactor and boiling water reactor provider in nuclear in the United States. So I started in 2003 after serving 6 years in the Navy. So I got a lot of experience in the Navy on nuclear. Due to our demographics changes over the last few years, nuclear from the Navy, that resource has not been available as much as it was, 20 years ago. So we partnered in early 2000s with Bismarck State College. Based on that, we have a nuclear power and technology 2-year degree that we have seen at least a few, 3 individuals that I've hired over that time period directly from that organization. So the partnership with Bruce's team, Kyron, is who I work with directly at his site, at his area, and it has been an awesome opportunity, for us. So the partnership, we are accredited our training program in a nuclear plant as required by the federal regulations. So by partnering with them, that accreditation is also reviewed on a 6-year period as well to keep that accreditation active. So it's a great opportunity for us as partners in that. At Byron, I started in operations. I started in the main control room. I got my Nuclear Regulatory Commission license in 2006. So I've operated, the plant, and I can tell you that the individuals that we get from this program are definitely have a step up on even a 4-year degreed bachelor's, degree in engineering from, U of I, which is an awesome college. But those individuals don't have the hands-on experience that we're able to provide through the Bismarck State 2-year degree. So it really gives them a leg up on understanding that role and the responsibilities to be an operator in a nuclear power plant. So not that all their graduates don't come to our plant, but just from an actual direct experience, 3 of them in the last couple years. I have one in the current program that, I'll just tell you, they're definitely a resource for the other individuals in the class. And, he was a security guard at our plant, wanted to expand his opportunities within Exelon Nuclear, and this was a great program. So he worked with Kyron, and he obtained his 2-year degree, and then I hired him as an equipment operator, and he's, within a few months, he'll be in the plant, on shift, and he's actually a resource in the room. So there's 4-year bachelor degrees that are getting input from him, even though he has a 2-year degree. But because his experience is hands-on, it's been a great partnership. And in EPSI, I'm the chairman of that coalition, so it goes beyond Exelon. So we have Dominion, Duke Energy, that are all panelists with Christine and with Kyron. So we meet every quarter to discuss our curriculum, and that partnership is a great resource for us.
Thank you. And Bruce?
Sure, and again, I'm Bruce Emmil. I'm the Dean of the Energy Center at Bismarck State College. Bismarck is in North Dakota, for those of you who don't know. North Dakota is very energy rich. We're very fortunate. We have all energy sources from coal, lots of wind, lots of oil, lots of natural gas, ethanol, biodiesel. Pretty much have everything other than nuclear power in North Dakota. And so Bismarck State started our energy programs back in 1970. It was our initial program. So we've been doing it now for almost 50 years. In 2001, we were invited to join the EPSI Coalition as the initial education provider for EPSI. So we are very proud of that fact to be chosen for that. Our first goal with EPSI was to develop an electrical distribution program. At that time, there wasn't really much out there. Most of the companies that were part of EPSI, they relied on the-job training for their distribution folks. So working with us from the scratch, looking at the job duties and whatnot, we slowly developed objectives and outlined the program for a 2-year program in electrical distribution. Shortly after that, the nuclear industry heard about us, and they loved the fact that the industry was really helping build and design this curriculum. And so they came to EPSI and to Bismarck and said, would you do the same for the nuclear industry? They actually knew about Bismarck. They hired some of our fossil power plant graduates in the past. They loved our graduates, but they said take the coal out of it and put the reactor in there, So big change for us, but we built that online program in nuclear power as well then in 2004. And so we've been a proud member of EPSI since day one. So we have 2 full programs we built with them from the scratch, ground up. Nuclear actually was a little bit easier, believe it or not, because nuclear is very regulated, and they had their objectives and ACAD documents they had to follow. All the plants had to follow that. So actually it was easier task for us than building the first program in distribution, where it was all just OJT by industry. So, but to date we have 12 different energy programs. It's about 25 to 30% of Bismarck State College's enrollment is energy. So it's a big part of our campus. And again, we're really focused on that 2-year, that technician, that operator, giving them a career, not just a job. So with that, I'll turn it over.
Thank you both. And from the NACTEL side, Nancy?
Good morning. So I want you to think back to 1999, and you heard a little bit about it from Coach and Chris about disruptive factors. And I think each of you being here today, you're probably a disruptor within your organizations. In 1999, the telecommunications industry was in the dire need of having what was then going to be called a network technician prepared to pull a second copper line to every home for this thing called the internet. That's where we started with the Alliance, and it was made up of companies that don't really exist today. They're there, but they're named differently. So the workforce that was going to be served by our degree programs grew up and took their positions thinking that they'd receive all of the training they needed from within the organization, but the organizations themselves changed. So the coalition is made up of 4 corporations, but also 2 labor unions, CWA and IBEW. We come together 4 times a year to look at the curriculum that's going to guide the workforce development. It started with a single associate degree. It's grown to 5 associate degrees, 2 bachelor's degrees, and a master's degree. Persons who were in these technician positions never thought they'd earn a degree. Once we made it accessible to them so that their jobs are 24/7. They react to whatever is happening to maintain communication. So for them to go to a traditional classroom was impossible. So delivering this curricula online really made it accessible to them wherever their jobs took them. So that's our story, and you'll hear more about it as we go.
Thanks, I appreciate it. So I'll talk a little bit about Verizon. I'd like to really point out that this is a very large company. And for us to have our own internal training corporation, we have 140,000 employees. Our L&D professionals that work in our organization, we've got about 850 folks. I mean, that's, I'm sure, larger than some of the colleges that are here today. But the point being is that these companies are very, very large, but we still value those partnerships. When I think about what me and my colleagues do is we really focus on a task. We have to build something, we have to do something, and we focus on that, and that's what we educate our employees on. But the value that these partnerships bring in is building out or filling that larger knowledge base that our employees will need to build the networks of the future. I'm one of the 4 companies that you refer to. And just to give you a little idea, I think we have 2 Fortune 20 companies. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention AT&T with 220,000 employees. I think they're higher on the Fortune list because of Game of Thrones, but luckily for Verizon, Game of Thrones is over, and we'll be able to maybe get that spot
awesome.
later on in the future. But very, once again, very large companies, and AT&T also values the partnerships of the educators and also the learning and development organizations that they have. Now, I know I'm dealing with educators in this room, so when I say the word union, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So imagine back in 2016, me sitting at a table with the top representative from IBEW when Verizon was out on strike. And that's the beauty of our partnership. We got together. Verizon had 40,000 employees that weren't working at the time, and IBEW represented most of those employees. But we still got together with these curriculum meetings that we had to really work through our issues and any issues that we had going on with NACTEL. And there wasn't a fist fight over the table, which was always a good thing between union and management. So we really do appreciate it, and I think it's an integral part of us moving forward and growing our business. I'm just going to go back to 1999, once again from a cell phone perspective, and I know we had many people mention this reference here, but if you think about the cell phone that you had back in 2000, for the folks that are that old, and you think about the cell phone that you had today, the one thing about the telecommunications industry is that as much as your cell phone has changed, and I thought it was the dumbest thing when I first saw a camera on a cell phone, that's just me though, I'm sorry. As much as your cell phone has changed between 2000 and now, you just think about what you had back then, because I know it's in a drawer somewhere in your house, closet, lower bedroom drawer. Our network has changed. So we've had a sea change of network upgrades, changes, and we'll be building new things in the future. And if you don't have a workforce that has that larger picture or larger knowledge of what we're doing or what we're trying to do, you're really at a disadvantage.
Thank you, all of you. I really appreciate that. I do have a couple slides I want to show. Maybe I can get this turned on and I can forward as they're working on that. I just want to say, you know, it takes a lot to sustain this type of, how would I say, industry employer education partnerships, right? None of the companies represented today, both Verizon and Exelon, are solely represented by the college in these particular partnerships. It's the industry of all of these energy companies and all of these telecommunication companies coming together, and that's helpful in the sustainability part of having a program that's 18 and 20 years old. It really takes true partnerships. It takes, I would say, synergies between making sure that time and resources on both parties are really invested and that there's an ROI behind it. So some of that ROI is around curriculum. So I want to talk a little bit about curriculum, and we'll try to get the slides going here. As we really go into that, it's really one of those really important roles, right? Having the right type of curriculum to build the skill sets. Yesterday, I think we heard about the T shape versus the M shape. When you start thinking about the models around really specialized skills. And specialized skills is really what these two particular coalitions bring to the table. And when we think about those specialized skills, as you've heard Jeff mention and Nancy mention, the evolution of what's happened in telecom is gigantic, continues to be big. Energy is the same way. You have one representative, one generation here of energy being nuclear, but we have so much generation happening with different types of energy. So you think about that M shape of specialized skills really being more about a multi-skilled worker, a multi-skilled technician, a multi-skilled professional. And so these are the type of evolutions that continues to happen by having industry be at the forefront of the curriculum that's required versus an employer. I want to really point that out. So when we think about that, you know, per that survey that I mentioned earlier from APSEA on higher education and employer partnerships, One of the most common methods of working with employers is to customize and co-design curriculum. It's about 48% at that survey indicated that is what's happening when you talk about what is a partnership between an employer and a higher education institution. It's really about making sure the curriculum is co-designed and it's valued, right, by the workforce, it's valued by the employer. So when we think about that, I really like to have Nancy and Bruce, both of you kind of talk about how your faculty, how your departments back within your own universities and colleges really see and support a direct link between the employer feedback and the tuition value that it's bringing to students in the program. And whoever would like to start first, I'll make sure we have the slide up.
I think I'll go first because our slide is there, and I'll explain a little bit more. This curriculum that you're looking at, we refer to as our industry-driven curriculum. And the companies that come to the table are AT&T, Verizon, CenturyLink, and Frontier. All of them have evolved and serve different groups within the telecommunications industry, but they're competitors. And then we have the two unions. So we are, when we're developing the curriculum, we're looking at the needs of the workforce from the employer's perspective and from the employee's perspective in terms of this education pathway is mapped to a career pathway, and it allows the adult learner to enter where they need to enter and then to continue on to build the credentials that they need to build their career pathway. We have, in essence, unbundled the degree. We break the degree down into the undergraduate experience into the associate and the bachelor's level, and then within it we have certificates. We're now unbundling it even further because we realize that the competencies that are needed for many of the new positions require certain skill sets. So we're now going to be offering badges that are made up of a grouping of our courses that would allow the learner to either earn the badge and acquire the competencies and move ahead, or bundle badges together to earn a degree. Excuse me. So it's been very exciting, and I really think that in large part it comes from the leadership that Hale has provided, because they bring us together 4 times a year for 20 years. I've only missed one meeting, and that was one of the early meetings. And there we share and build the curriculum. Now think about your curriculum committees and your internal approval process within your universities. I'm a full-time faculty member in the School of Computer Science and Information Systems. They generally don't have an open door to anybody suggesting how they should be creating the curriculum. But that openness, and you've heard it in this, with the speakers before today, allows for change to occur and for a curriculum to evolve that serves the students' needs and the employer's needs. So it's a win-win situation. But it takes a culture change to do that. And Hale has been masterful in bringing this group together and really showing the openness. We try new things, and they're disruptive, and some work and some don't, but that's really been part of the thrill of it all. And it's seeing the success of the students, the outcomes. And we hold once a year, and Jeff and I were just at an event a couple of weeks ago where we bring our online learners to campus, and most of them, it's a thrill because they're earning their degree. We graduate at Radio City, so you can dance across the stage if you want. But the other piece of it is they finally get to see the other students and the faculty that they've been working with online. And the input, the board also attends the input that they've had in crafting this curriculum, which has really created a career path for them as well as an educational pathway.
Thank you. And thinking of Bruce, I'll move it over to the education pathway slide for EPSI. It's a little bit different. We've broken it up into the types of work within the energy industry around transmission, distribution, engineering, some specialties as well, generation. So when we think about, Bruce, some of the same questions around how Bismarck State College really looks at the value of this type of partnership and that direct linkage of also to the student and benefiting in that way. And also if you want to touch on some of the experiential learning as Hale, that is very, very key to us when we think about adult working learners. It has to be a part of curriculum, and Bismarck State College has done that through a lot of different animations and simulations that they brought into the curriculum.
Sure. So one difference for me, I guess, with the EPSI Coalition and Bismarck State College is that it's a national coalition. We all have our local or our regional advisory type committees, but this is a national group. So we got industry across the nation coming together 3-4 times a year face to face, and then also numerous conference calls, as Rob mentioned, throughout the year. What's really nice about that is when something changes in industry, or the coalition agrees to change something, it's done, and it's consistent across the industry. Do it once and it's done. You're not going to 10, 12, 15 different colleges to make these changes. So one change, it's done, and the coalition moves on. So it's really quick to change. I think it's really powerful for the coalition. The other thing is that Christine mentioned our interactive learning tools. So a lot of stuff we're doing is very technical. So how do you train or teach technical stuff online? That can be a challenge. And so we've got a small team at Bismarck State College that builds our own interactive learning tools, we call them, ILTs, like simple animations to mini simulations to full-blown simulations. And like the old education, a picture's worth 1,000 words in education. Well, what's a simple animation worth? Or what's a simulation worth if a picture's worth 1,000 words? So having these tools out there for the students to really see the inner workings of equipment, of systems is very, very valuable. A lot of our industry partners also want to use those same tools for their internal training program. So we license them to industry to use them as well. So it's been really, it makes the program much more robust. Most of our students are interested in hands-on type working. Behind the desk, for 4 hours a day is not really their thing. So they want to be engaged in their curriculum. And most of the young students, they've been raised on video games and stuff too. So how can we actually make it where they're actually learning somewhat by playing, and that's always a challenge for us. So everything we do for online, we also can use in our classroom. So it's really a win-win, for our students and for our faculty. One thing that's also different, I think, with what we've done is in the energy area of BSC is our department chairs. They're actually 12-month positions, and they don't teach. They're full-time department chairs. We used to actually call them program managers at one time, but basically they manage the programs. Like Rob mentioned, Byron a few times, he's the manager of our nuclear power program. So they're very engaged with the coalition, with the industry partners across the country. It takes a lot of time to do that and do that right. And so we want them to be focused full-time on the actual program. Let the faculty teach. So we got about 35 full-time faculty. We have about 60 adjunct faculty, and I think that's kind of a national trend. You're seeing lots of adjunct faculty in higher ed, and so how do you make sure that we're making sure the curriculum's up to date? Because adjunct faculty probably aren't going to be as engaged in some of those types of activities as a full-time faculty member would be. So I think what else I wanted to mention, Christine, but I think that's probably good.
Great. Yeah. And so I'm going to shift in thinking about it from the employer perspective. You think about the curriculum that these programs provide. They need to be valued, right? They need to be valued by the employer, but most importantly, they need to be valued by the employee. So when you think about making sure there is value set there, you really have to have the curriculum designed to meet specific technical workforce competencies, especially in these two arenas. So, you have to support critical thinking, you have to have it make sure that it's supporting some of the complex problems that you guys have within all of your different technician work. So when you think about that, maybe you could talk about how you're personally involved, one, in this curriculum, and two, how your organization values it. So Rob, do you want to go first?
Sure. So thank you, Christine. So one of the items that I feel is probably the best to highlight on the BSc curriculum for nuclear power technology is the interactiveness, the human performance simulation. So similar to I guess the airline industry, right? Human performance is the quickest way for an individual in nuclear to cause issues, right? So you have an individual out in the field, you obviously give them as much training as you can, refresher training after initial training, but ultimately, 1, 2 a.m. in the morning, or you're landing in a certain flight, right? There's an individual that's turning a switch or operating a piece of equipment in the plant. So it's our part as employers to provide them with as much education as possible to do that. Well, one of the areas we're able to help that foundational understanding is with the initial programs, and in this case, with the 2-year program, we can introduce them to human performance standards then. So there's a couple simulations, not highlighted them at a previous presentation earlier this year, because it's one area that I have seen actual results, direct results from my own observations in the plant on human performance. And one of them is there's a, so there's a little bit of technical here, so please apologize if I do it, but, 480 volt. So, obviously a little bit more voltage in your house, but individuals are out in the plant, manipulating a breaker, in the field. And if you, number one, go to the wrong breaker, that's a bad thing. If you misoperate it and break it, that could be a very vitally important piece of equipment that you just made unavailable. So if I can introduce them to that concept early in the process, i.e., while they're getting their foundational, 2-year degree, and then I'll reinforce it in my initial program before they even have that opportunity to be out in the field at 1 or 2 a.m. In the morning, and God forbid they do something wrong. So Kyron and the team, came to our plant. They, mapped out and looked at the breaker that we were doing. They created a virtual simulation of it. So it's not just, point and click. It's, rotate this, device this way, look for this indication, do that thing. So this human performance has a follow-up procedure, right? So a very rigid process that we have in the plant. But we introduce them to that while they're getting their initial training. Additionally, there's a troubleshooting for our, we have actually a tertiary system. So, right, there's a primary, which is the reactor coolant, a secondary, which is our, steam producing that actually, produces the electricity. And then we have to reject that heat somewhere. Well, we have cooling towers. So we said, hey, maybe we could give an opportunity. If I dispatch an operator to go look for something out there, it'd really be nice to have an opportunity to introduce them to those concepts of complex analysis and determination of, well, geez, what's the ultimate result of this system, and what are the kind of step-by-step situations that could be failed that could lead us to rectify the situation. So Kyron and his team developed a troubleshooting aid with that, which showed various temperatures and flows and pressures. So to walk them through, faults or errors in the system and have them break down, from a more technical level, not just black and white, hey, if this thing's broke, here's what's wrong. They can actually go out there and understand the system flow paths and hey, what do I have to look for? And here's the information that my operators in the control room are going to be looking for. Do I understand where they came from? Not just, can I read them out of a manual? Because ultimately, we can produce individuals, technicians that can just read out of a manual and are kind of robotic in that nature. But if you have an engaged thinking operator, that's going to make you successful, right, as an employer. So the fact that we can partner with EPSI and partner with BSC to really, gain that insight from other individuals in our industry, and then mold it or cater it towards our specific curriculum and specific tasks that are in our accreditation objectives, to say, hey, this operator has to not only be able to list, but also understand. And it's hard to really test understanding without putting them through specific proficiency testing and evaluation. So that's probably the greatest advantage I've seen with our partnership, is I can call Kyron up and say, hey, we just got a new breaker. Here's what it's about. Let's get together as a team and talk about it. Does Dominion and does Entergy and does, do they have a similar change in their technical aspect? Maybe we need to reevaluate or change our curriculum to align and prepare the student. And I'm able to do that. And maybe it won't result in that. Maybe there's still enough standard, functions that we don't need to, but at least I know I can call them on my cell phone. I was telling Christine earlier this year, him and I were talking on January 2nd. It was like I was on a vacation, he was on vacation, but you know what? Something came up, we reviewed it, we talked about it. 45 minutes, an hour later, we determined there was no immediate change that was needed to the curriculum. They were starting up a spring semester. We wanted to make sure we had the right material for them, but they were willing to talk, work through it. And other times when there are changes, we definitely streamline the process by having that relationship.
Thank you. And I would say too that because it's online and because Rob is a chair of curriculum council, he has access to that online format 24/7. So you can get in and review content as necessary. So moving into NACTEL and thinking about Verizon's perspective of how you personally are involved and how your organization values the curriculum that NACTEL has.
Sure. So I'm personally involved in the curriculum committee that we have, and it's across all the companies and the unions, and I do want to specify that. And what I mean by that is when you look at the list here, it's one thing to look at the list in whole, but you have to understand how the list came about. The list really came about is us looking at what our companies were doing at that time. So if we go back to 1999, what were we looking at, or what was the task we were trying to accomplish? And the curriculum was really built around how we were going to accomplish that task as an industry. So it's not just the employer, it was also the employees that were involved. So the one thing that I'm going to tell you is that the information that is in these courses is cutting edge because all of us come from either the training departments or L&D departments from those companies. So obviously we know what we're doing. Right now we're building 5G networks and we know how to do that. So what we do is we take that information and we pass it on to Pace University. So all the information that we have is really, when you said by industry for industry, from the very beginning, from the first certificate, from the first associate degree. When you look at mobile there, you'll see mobile as an item, as an associate degree. But what you have to understand is that we've changed mobile 4 times. And every single time those four changes, I mean, analog to digital, 3G to 4G, 4G to 5G, 5G is a completely new build. Every single step of the way that we've made these changes, we work with Pace to make sure that the curriculum reflected what was going on in the industry. And that's very, very important to us. We do appreciate that. So from a Verizon perspective, when I look at this, I'm going to tell you that from Verizon very specifically, I'll say that, if we go back some years ago, we built a fiber network on the East Coast. And we were on the forefront of talking to our students about what the capabilities of what fiber optics was. And we educated our NACTEL students on what that could do for us. In the last 2 years, we bought $1.5 billion worth of fiber. Is it still paying off for us? I'm just saying from way back in 2000, 2002, we're talking about concepts and ideas that's really going to take our company, 50, 60 years into the future. And this is something we did a long time ago. This is now something we don't even think about, but it's core and central to us building out a 5G network. That's the type of foresight that we're implanting in the curriculum that we have to make sure that our students participate in this program are successful.
Fantastic. So we've talked a lot about the benefits and the value. I'm going to shift and ask the panelists to think about challenges, because none of this happens without challenges. And I really want you to kind of keep the learner, the employee in mind, as we know that what we're trying to always accomplish is to be a benefit to them. It has to help them on their career pathway, has to be then something that they take on as a credential that they can continue to increase their skills and knowledge. So when you think about challenges to make sure that we're meeting the end objective with these adult working learners, really from your employer and educator hats, what are challenges when you come together in this type of a partnership? And I don't know who'd like to go first, maybe. Who's brave?
I have a 30-second version. So I would say the only big challenge we have is the demographic change. So nuclear has not changed technology a whole lot. I mean, there's designs that we still utilize that were, thought up, in the 50s. We may have better instrumentation, better technology monitoring, and all that, but ultimately you still have the same skill sets needed. So our biggest challenge is go to shift from teaching to education, right? So you can teach somebody anything, but you have to really educate them to be engaged and understand how it works. And that's probably our challenge is the learner themselves learns differently, and that's where the online simulations and the next version that Carmen and I, Bruce's team and I will be looking at is virtual reality to really, we've started that in our nuclear and Exelon, so now I want to shift it over and introduce it into the online program to really get the learner definite more hands-on, because I can say, hey, go look at this indication. What does that mean? Until I actually get them out of a chair, move them into the plant and show them that indication, they're not going to understand that. Well, they're not going to be able to do that at BSC. But if I have my area and my plant already mapped and scanned in a computer program, we can actually put them into a diesel generator, area and say, look for this temperature. And they can actually do that via virtual reality. So that's kind of our next step, is really focusing on the learner. And that's probably the biggest challenge is the amount of time it takes to kind of work that through the process. But the partnership will help expedite that process.
Yeah, and I guess our challenge internally is just keeping pace with technology. So a lot of our interactive learning tools are built in Flash right now. Well, you probably know Flash is going away slowly here. It's going to be not supported come December 2020. And so we're looking at trying to get all of our ILTs, which is literally a couple thousand, I would say, converted to another platform here by 2020. And so whether that's going to be JavaScript or HTML, whatever it's going to be, but there's always technology changes. Some of our simulations also run on browsers. Well, certain browsers stop supporting, certain technologies. We have some Silverlight technology that we're updating now to HTML5. So it's constant changes with technology. The other internal challenge, I guess, for us is we're competing with a very high-paying industry. So for me to attract and retain high-quality faculty, it's a challenge because industry pays so well. Most of these industries, they're all six-figure jobs as far as the energy industry. And so being a small community college, we've kind of disrupted a little bit internally. We've caused some disruption. We have certain parts of campus that, think energy has it better. So we've definitely done some things different. The rest of campus is 9-month, department chairs. They teach half-time. Again, ours are 12 months. They don't teach. And so some of those kind of things, people looking that the grass is greener on other parts of campus at times can be a challenge and disruption, which does explain some of my thinning hair, if you haven't noticed.
I think you look just fine. But I would say the disruption is really, it's a real thing because the technology is always changing. The platforms in which we have delivered our courses have changed. And as you can see from our curriculum map, something that has had a tremendous influence on the way we deliver our education is cybersecurity. I mean, we're talking about networks that need to be secure. So as we make a change to keep up with the changes in the technology, we go back and revisit all of the courses that support all of the different degrees to ensure that the elements of that change are present in all of the work that we do. So keeping the curriculum up to date is something that's, from a university perspective, I wish I had maybe decided to teach history. But it couldn't be more exciting than to be working with a program of this kind in a School of Computer Science where change is inevitable. We too have difficulty with the faculty, attracting the faculty because there's so much opportunity in the New York metropolitan area for high-paying positions, but we do feel that the faculty that do come to us really have the mission of the program in mind. They realize that we're reaching students at a distance who would not have the opportunity to have this kind of curriculum available to them had it not been available online.
Okay, I would think some of the challenges are, from an employer point of view, is the good thing is that we are a coalition. Both groups are coalitions, meaning that we have multiple partners. I couldn't imagine what this would look like with just one partner. And what I mean by that is I think about my company having multiple CEOs, having multiple senior VPs who have different ideas about how education partnership should work. So now once you take that and you multiply that by 4 companies, it's interesting. We have ebbs and flows of the level of participation within this coalition. And sometimes one company is very high and other times others are low, and it sort of ebbs and flows. So I think it's been very, very helpful for us to have multiple companies to really keep this pushing forward. Also from a union perspective, we've got the two unions that we have, they've got dwindling membership, and they also have competing priorities. So if you think about 6 companies trying to agree on what we should do and how we should move forward, it's very difficult in light of what leadership from these companies would actually have us do. So that's been a big challenge, but it's really been good that we're together and not just one company and going down this road with one educational institution.
Thank you. We have about 10 minutes and we want to open it up to questions. Make sure that everyone has an opportunity to ask any of our panelists any type of question you might have.
Do you have any connections and corporations that tend to social workers?
We have advisors who work with our students to determine where they need to begin the program. Something that we did not speak about is our students come in, many of them we see have maybe 10 transcripts or more. They've started and stopped. They're the typical adult learner. They've started and stopped their education, and many times they were not successful before. And if I were to examine what the barriers were, it's generally math. So one of the things that our advisors are very good at is really determining how that we're going to begin our work with the student. It could be through a prior learning assessment process to really determine how we could take advantage of the experience that they've had that really shows their ability to be successful, and then to bring in the academic credits that they've earned as well. So we begin them at the right point, and generally there's a plan for how to move them ahead with the math requirement. As you can see from our curriculum, there's a growing need for higher level math skills. We've always had it present in the networking courses, and the data analytics that we're now doing for the networks really requires that they move not only through the technical math, they move on to statistics and more advanced mathematics. So we try to ascertain that and determine it early on so that we have them prepared for the path they want to go.
I don't know if that helps, but appreciate the question. I see another one in the back.
Thank you for everyone sharing. I had a quick question regarding badges. You had mentioned badges earlier on and modularizing your curriculum. And so this question's really, I guess, for Verizon or really any of you, but are these badges meaningful to Verizon, and are they used for non-Verizon employees or who might want to ultimately get a career with Verizon, or are they for internal use? So how does, I guess to summarize, how does Verizon view badges? How would you utilize those badges?
I was just going to pass it over to Nancy because our badging starts in August. and I apologize. So I don't have any history specifically with Verizon, but I will talk a little bit about the badging process and how we put it together for NACTA or Nancy.
What the objective was is really to unbundle the curriculum. The badging that we're going to do through Credly is validated badges. So we've designed it to utilize the existing courses that we have, and it gives the learner the opportunity to start at a point where they are not making perhaps a commitment to earn the degree. But we also see it as an opportunity for the learners to bundle them together. Now, to do this, you have to really explore your courses, and we as educators develop our learning objectives, and they're quite involved, and they're tied to competencies. The badging is also tied to skills. So what we've worked with the board members to do is to really look at the job descriptions, because what the badging allows us to do is to store the metadata for the learners so that it's always present. They can see what the courses were, so they don't have to request a transcript. It's a validated badge, and all the information about the courses that were taken are part of the metadata that's portable to various social media areas, so they can post the badges. But what it also ties to is the opportunities within the industry to see other job opportunities that this badge may lead them to. So it's a way of helping them navigate. Again, we have those two pathways, the education pathway and that pathway as it connects to a career pathway. So badging is another way to tie, if I earn this badge, I can see exactly the type of position that this would lead me to based on the skills that are being taken from actual job postings. I hope that answered the question.
Great. Well, I am super fortunate to be able to work with both of these coalitions, both the employers and the higher education institutions. It's a real pleasure for me. And I just would leave this opportunity with the panelists to indicate if there's any advice that you'd like to provide to others that, one, are working with strategic partnerships with employers, or two, would like to.
I guess I'm on the end, so I'll start. So I would say one of the key, aspects is when you do form a partnership, or if you already have a partnership, is communication. So, the availability or the accessibility of individuals to ensure that, at a minimum, you have a conversation about what's changing or what your thoughts are, to be able to balance them off the individuals to say, well, maybe that's not the way we need to go. We need to go this way. So it's not that, hey, I can tell BSC what I want. That's not the way this relationship, right, that we have formed with them. It's, hey, something's changing. Let's get together and have a conversation. So ultimately, it's open, honest communications, discussions, and then from there, right, then we can go through the storming, norming, and forming, and develop a team if we need to go fix it. Or we can say, hey, that's something that maybe is unique to Exelon or unique to Byron, so I'll have to quote unquote deal with it. Or, hey, it's an industry item and it needs the attention, and then BSC is very receptive to that if our coalition agrees. So I think communication is probably the biggest thing if you're going to form, that you can at least establish that networking or that communication methods.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And just for us, just partnerships in general are our key. With working with Hale has been huge for us. Working with industry is tremendously huge for us, and other colleges as well. So colleges I think sometimes we all kind of want to think we should offer everything to everybody, and we just can't. So we kind of know what our niche is and work with other colleges to develop relationships as well. A number of colleges work with us. We deliver some technical stuff online for them. They offer the gen eds and the degree or whatnot. So to me, it's all about partnerships and how do we all survive in this, the future of higher ed. And as you know, it's very expensive to offer certain programs. You get into simulations, animations, it's very expensive. So how do you sustain those models? And again, it's through partnerships, I think.
Yeah, I think partnership is key, and Hale brings us together, and it gives us an opportunity to communicate. And from a university perspective, it's wanting to share back information about the program. So when we do come together 4 times a year, we also look at the outcomes, the student outcomes at the course level and at the program level.
I think I would mention from an industry point of view is that when I think about my peers, we're used to moving at the speed of light. So from inception, development, delivery to closure, it'd be 6 months. And it didn't matter if it cost $15 million and it was 6,000 people. That's our timelines. So working with industry, you must understand that our speed does not match the educational system. And be mindful of that when you go into this.
Yeah.
Nice way to close it.
Yeah. And dare we say yet, because disruption is in the midst, right? So, well, thank you all. Thank you very much for this time, and I want to thank our panelists. Appreciate it.